Welcome back. In this video, we're going to do an overview of Windows. We're going to also rename the current computer to start down our journey of creating a domain controller in a new domain. We're also going to look at the local user on the computer before we create that and what the differences are between a local computer and a domain controller. We're also going to look at groups, and that's going to be on the local level and on the domain level. We're also going to look at the tools that are available to the administrator. That's going to be in the admin tools section. The event log is going to be the collection of events that errors and things that happen on the server, whether they're going to be audits or success and failures, things of that nature. We'll look at where that information is stored at. We're also going to look at the server management snap-in, the MMC console, the Microsoft Management Console, the new way that it's presented versus the way it was in 2008. We're going to take a look at that. So with that all being said, let's get started. All right, so here we are in our server that we built in the last video. So within here, we're going to go through and we're going to bring up the server manager. It's going to be this area right here. So within the server manager, we can see here is our computer name. This is the default name that gets built or gets assigned, I should say, whenever the server is built. It's currently part of a local work group, meaning that it's not part of a domain. This is more or less like a home computer at this time because it doesn't do anything. Like without any membership or anything, it's kind of just a computer. It's not really doing anything. So within this server management console here, we can actually get to our firewall. It's more like shortcuts. We can go ahead and adjust our remote management. And this is whether or not the server can be managed remotely. As you can see here, we can click on this and enable it and disable it from here. And, it's talking about WMI as well. That's going to be through scripting. As you go down your journey and you start learning how to write scripts, WMI will come into play there, and this will become more familiar to you. And as you can see here, remote desktop, that's currently disabled. As we go through here, I'm going to go through some of the options that are here in this screen here. You can see here, do not allow connections to this computer. So even if the firewall was enabled on this computer, you wouldn't be able to connect to this computer over a remote desktop. And we'll go through that in another section to where we will connect to this computer remotely from another location. And one of the other options here that it says is allow this computer here to be accessed from remote. So once you enable this, you have to go through and enable it in the Windows firewall. You also have to go through and assign users who can access this server remotely. We'll click on OK. And this check mark here that we're seeing here, this is because of a version that was updated, which was RDP 6.1. And with that, you have to enable this in the registry. It's going to be called NLA, and it's recommended. One is that it allows you to have a secure connection to the server, but also it says, you are who you say you are. You're not just a rogue user trying to connect. Without that being enabled on your computer, if you haven't went into the registry and enabled that, even with it being allowed and you have a user account here that's been allowed access, this will still not allow you to access. Even if you're part of the same domain, it won't matter. So normally you'll have to come in here and uncheck this until you can get that corrected on your computer. So from here, you'll go ahead and say select user. You'll go ahead and add the users in that you want to have access to this computer remotely. By default, the administrator has access. So from here, you go ahead and click add. And if this was on a domain, we would actually click location. And from here, we would actually see our domain here. Once we join the computer to the domain and things of that nature, we'll come back in here and do this portion here. But I did want to explore these options with you. So as we go here, we're going to go ahead and go through these tabs that we have here. We can go to the Advanced tab here, and this is going to be your Performance tab. And you can get to this screen either from here, or you can get to it from the computer here. You can right-click here and go to Properties here. And you can get to the same place through here by going to Advanced System Settings and it's going to pop up the same thing here. So it's more or less like this console is kind of a shortcut to get you to the same location. If you're familiar with 2008, that would be the normal ways that you would get there is by right-clicking on computer, going to properties, and selecting these particular options here. But in 2012, in the management server manager, you can get there from within the server manager itself. So we'll continue. Underneath our performance tab here, we're going to go into here, and this talks about the way the server is performing. So if you have a server that's actually kind of sluggish and things, and it's got the visual effects, and this is talking about how Windows is presented to you. So if you want smooth corners, smooth edges, like right here that's selected, this actually takes processing power away from the server. So if you're needing your server to actually be spot on with as much performance as it can give, you want to come through and uncheck a lot of these things here, because you really won't need them, and just select apply and they'll take effect right then. Some of the ones that won't, it'll actually tell you you're going to need to restart. All right, or you can say adjust for best performance. And so you can see here best appearance, and adjust for best performance is going to be nothing. And if you keep it the way it was when you came in here, it's going to be just like that. Go to the advanced tab here. All your servers, they're going to be configured for background services. This is going to be the Windows services that are processed in the background. So it's saying to give them the processing power, not programs running in the foreground. Program running in the foreground would be like Word or Outlook or some program like that, or like Internet Explorer or Google Chrome. Those are going to be programs that run in the foreground. So you want to always have your server set to the background services, but because this is a server, Microsoft knows that this is a server, so they go ahead and select this for you. So your virtual memory here, this is going to be for your page file, and this is usually 1.5 times the amount of memory in the server. So right now this is set for automatically adjust, and because it's set for automatically adjust, we don't have to do anything with it. Windows will adjust this for us. If we were wanting optimum performance, we would uncheck this. We would come in here and do a custom page size. We would say, if we had 2 drives on here, we would take it off of the C drive for performance and put it onto the D drive or E drive if we have multiple hard drives, because we want as much performance we can out of this C drive. So we would then set our memory size. So we know we have 4 gigs of memory in here. We would set this minimum here to 1.5 of that. So in this case here, for an example, we would set this to 1.5 gigs. And then our maximum, because we want to go over, we could set this to 5 gigs. And so, once it hits the 4 gig mark, so the server only has 4 gigs of memory, at that point, this server will start paging to the drive here. So this C drive or D drive, whichever, if we had an extra drive here, it would actually start paging out to that drive. What it does is when it writes those things out, that's for performance. So it wants to get, something is needing more memory. And because we don't have it here, we put it on the C drive and let it use it as the memory. This will be slower, but it will let the server continue to process versus running out of memory. So system manage size, that's kind of what we were saying before here, where the system manages it. Once you hit set, it'll actually do it. No page file. Normally, if you have enough memory in your server, so if this server had 200 gigs of RAM in it, and we were only utilizing 16 gigs of memory, we can just say no page file, because we wouldn't need it, because everything we would always have enough memory in the server itself. So normally we'll just keep this to automatic, and we'll go ahead and exit out of there. We'll go over here to the DEP. DEP has to do with the processors that are installed on the server. So if you have something that needs to access the kernel directly, and you can read more on this, and I would definitely suggest that you read more about this, because there are times where you will have applications that will need to be outside of a DEP, and you can see here, except those. And so you'll have to go in here and select add, go to your program, find the program, add it into here, restart the server, and it will be excluded from that, and it'll get the performance it needs away from the processor itself. But most applications these days are fine here with DEP. So we'll go ahead and hit cancel here. We'll go to our hardware tab, and we'll go ahead and click on Device Manager. Device manager is going to be for all of our devices that are in this particular computer. This is a virtual machine, but even if it was a hardware computer, the process would still be the same. We would still be able to have our same processors, whatever disk are assigned to it. In this case, it's virtual, but if it was a Hitachi or Western Digital, it would show up here. And this is more or less just showing all of our components that are installed on the server. So system devices, these are going to be the devices that are installed on here. As far as a storage controller, if we had a RAID array connected to this, our network adapters that's installed on this particular thing. Like I said before, this is a Hyper-V image, so it's going to show the Hyper-V network adapter. If we had a particular video card in here, you would see it underneath this display adapter here. Like right now, it says this one's a Hyper-V one. If it had like an NVIDIA in here, it would show up here. Same thing for your mouses and keyboards. They're all going to be here too. So the purpose for this is to be able to come in here, update the device drivers, disable them, scan for new hardware changes. So whenever you plug in a USB drive or something like that, it actually will show up in here as a external device. It'll be under like USB or something like that. But this is where the drivers get assigned to the device so that it's recognized within Windows so you can use it. So we'll go ahead and close out of here. And we'll come down here to device installation settings. And so this has to do with Windows updates and how these get applied. Normally you want to keep the defaults here until you decide of you as an administrator or someone in your company decides that how you guys are going to address your Windows updates. So this is where you can adjust this at. And you'll also do this from control panel as well. We'll go through that in later videos. So we'll go ahead and hit cancel here. Now we're at our tab here for our computer account. So here's our computer description box here. So we can type in what this computer is. So like for an example, if it was going to be an accounting server, we can type that here. We can leave it blank. We can change the name of the computer from here. As I was saying before, we could change it by going to computer and right clicking on it. So for here, we're going to go ahead and click on change, and we're going to go ahead and name our new computer here. And remember, this is going to be our new AD server that we're going to be using for our test environment that we're going to be building upon. So this one here is going to be called Lab AD01. All right, so one thing I want to explain here about the naming, you have 15 characters that you can work with here. That's the NetBIOS limit. And you can look that up to actually find out what your limits are as far as characters go. But all of them are going to be alphanumeric, and that's all you're going to specify here. You can do underscores and things of that nature, but remember, the more characters you specify, so if you get over 15 characters here, when it's time to search for this computer out on the network, you'll be limited. So from here, we'll go ahead and select more. And this is going to be our DNS suffix. We'll cover this more when we get into the DNS topic, and we'll talk about what this suffix is. It's mainly just an appending to the end of the name. So in this case here, by the time we're done, this will be this particular server, for an example, would be labad01 dot testlab01. So when it has that prefix here, it means everything that it goes to search for, it will then try to search against this name first. So if it's going to be lab 05, lab 06, lab 06, lab 07, things of that nature, it'll search those names first within the DNS suffix of that. So it's going to append that to it to try to guess at it before it moves on and tries to search out on the internet. So, and that will be like a forwarder or a forward lookup. So we'll go over that when we get into DNS. So for this case here, for this example, we're going to go ahead and select OK here. And we're going to get a prompt here to say OK. And then after this, we're going to have to do a restart. I'm going to say apply again. And now we're going to go ahead and let this server restart. All right, and we'll be right back once this server restarts. Okay, now that our server is back up, we're going to go through and look at the local users and look at the groups that are on the local machine. I will jump down here real quick to local server, and we can see here that the server was renamed. We're still in the same work group. While we're here, we just take a quick gander at some of the quick items here within this server manager. You can configure your Windows updates and things from here where it says not configured. Last updates were none, and the last time it checked for them, and your Windows error handling, you can see here that this is turned off. And this is how, if the server were to crash or applications crash, how these get reported and automatically send the reports and details over to Microsoft. If you want to participate in that, you can see here customer experience program not participating, and this is where you're going to configure your Internet Explorer security settings. And normally these are, when you first boot the servers up and they first come online, these are always going to be on. And so whenever you go to browse out to the internet, you will actually be prompted for each click that you make to know that it's secure. And so every time you click something, you'll get a prompt. If you wanted to turn that off, you'll turn that off here just to make your browsing experience a little better. But most of the time, you're not going to be browsing the internet anyway from a server like this. You're going to be doing it from your laptop or desktop computer. Time zone, here are the time zones where you would set it if you wanted to. Product ID, it's not activated yet. This is my test environment. How much memory is in the current server here? Is space available? Your IP address is currently assigned. If you wanted to re-IP it, you could from here. Same thing here with NIC teaming. That would be if I had 2 network cards within this server and I wanted to get better bandwidth. So this particular server has 1 gig of bandwidth. If I wanted to double that, I would do NIC teaming, meaning I can get up to 2 gigabits of bandwidth. And it also gives me redundancy if one of the links get cut or someone trips over it or something like that, pulls one of the network cables out. And we reviewed remote desktop earlier and the remote management earlier as well, as far as the firewall being off right now. Within here also, you can see your different events within here. You can also see the different services that are running. What we're going to do is go back up here to our dashboard, go over here to tools, and we're going to go ahead over here to computer management. So within the local computer, you can get to the events, and you can get to your users, your shared folders, everything for that local computer. I want to stress that that's local, not for a domain controller that we're going to be creating here as we go through this video series. So if we expand local users and groups, we can click on users. By default, the guest account is always disabled. If this account were to be enabled, it would be easy for a hacker to get in, or if you were at a coffee shop, if this account was enabled, it'd be easy for someone to get into your computer because this account doesn't have a password. So by default, Microsoft turns this account off. This is good for like if you're going to do like internet sharing and things like that from your laptop. Not really something people do these days, but the account is still here. Here's our administrator account. Once the server is joined to a domain, normally this account gets disabled because normally if a hacker is going to try to get in, they're going to go for the Holy Grail, which is going to be using the administrator account. So normally this is going to be disabled. So if we go down here to groups, we can see here there's a whole slew of groups here that are included with this, and you can add other groups within here. And as you, when you add a server to the domain, you're going to be creating more groups and things like that within here. Things like SQL groups or Exchange groups or, you know, what have you. You might create one called sales group or something if you needed to, if you need to do some local things. And we're going to talk more about the groups and things here in just a few. But if we go into the administrator group here, we can see here that no one else is a member of it, just the administrator. And if we had another user on this computer, we could add that user to this computer. So we could add it to this group and it would then be a local administrator. Same thing for like backup operators. So if this server was going to be used for backups, you would normally add the user into this backup operators group. Certificates, so on and so forth on down through here. Remote desktop users, you can see here there are no members in here. You'll usually use this group when you're doing things like terminal services, and that's going to be something outside of the scope of this this learning track here, but that will be for grouping servers together for remote users to be able to get in, and they'll use that as their computer versus logging on to a laptop and doing all their administration. They'll just be doing it from a server like we're in right now. Remote management users, same thing here that we saw earlier for WMI, and that's going to be mainly for scripting. You can see here we have our replicator, and then we have the users group here. And normally, if someone's going to just have access to the server, then you can add them to this users group here. All right. So as we go through here, and we're still inside of computer management, we'll go ahead and talk about the performance counters and things that are here. So as we can see here, we have performance monitors here. So if we wanted to see how the server was performing, we could come into here and actually set up a performance monitor to actually tell us how much CPU it's using in a given time, how many network connections, how many people are accessing it, things of that nature. And we can build a report out of it and say, hey, we need new servers because we're performing too slow, things of that nature. Device manager, we talked about earlier there, and that's going to be all of your devices that are in the computer, as we talked about earlier. Windows server backup, this is where we can come into here and actually create a backup schedule. So by default, Windows gives you a backup agent in here. It's called NT Backup. You can come into here and create a local backup. So like, let's say this is going to be a file server and you were getting handy with using batch files and things of that nature. You can come in here and create you a new backup and things like that from within here. Not a lot of folks use this at all. Most people will go and opt for something like a Veritas or a third-party product, but it is here if you need it. Disk management is going to be used for the local disk that are on the server. So if we had more disk on this particular server, we would actually come here, right click and scan disk, and then the new disk would actually show up here. So and then at that point we could expand that disk. We could right click on it and expand it. We could one thing we can't do is we can't expand our C drive on here. So kind of what you see is what you get here. So if we had another disk here, we can make it 20 gigs, and then if we needed more space, if we're running out of space, we could then right click on it and then extend the disk. And we're going to come back and look at more disk management, and we'll be exploring that and seeing how that works. For services, if we go into here, these are going to be the actual services that are running on the server itself. And as these start and stop, and these services are needed for running the actual server itself. And you have your two tabs here, your standard view and your extended view. Your extended view is going to give you descriptions over here versus the standard. When you click it, you just get this here. So you don't really get the explanations of what this is actually doing. So if you have a vendor that's installed something on a server, normally they'll write a description and go with it so that if you click on it, you can actually see what this particular service is for. Otherwise, you have to go to the description here and hover over it, and you'll get the description that way. Okay. And routing and remote access. This is like using a VPN. It's not something we're going to go over in here. There are servers and platforms that are just dedicated to just routing and remote access. It would just be a really, really, really large learning project to actually do to go through this. But most of the time you won't use this. You'll actually just use a router to actually do it versus using a Windows server to do it. But again, Microsoft's included it. So if you wanted to do it, you can. Your Wmi Controls, that's what I was referring to earlier. Once you start getting into scripting, you'll kind of start taking advantage of this. I'm not going to let that complete right now. So we'll cover that stuff later, or you can later when you get into more of scripting. We're going to come back up here to our shared folders. If we expand this here, we can see shares. So by default, Windows has the C dollar and the admin dollar and the IPC dollar. These are, as the description says here, remote admin, default share, and remote IPC. Normally, if you're going to try to connect to something, if you're an admin, you'll connect to the C dollar, something of that nature. Normally what you'll do is go ahead and create shares within the file server. So if this is going to be a file server, you would create them on the file server and the shares would show up here. So it'd be like sales, accounting, inventory, things of that nature. Any files that are being accessed at that particular time would show up here under open files, and any sessions. So if there were local users on the network accessing the shares on here, you'll actually see them underneath this folder here. So you would click here, and then at that point you could right click on here and disconnect all of the sessions or disconnect that particular session. So if someone was accessing a file and you said, hey, I didn't really need to back this file up and it was being blocked, you can right click on that and say end task for that particular person. Or if it was an open file, you could come in here and close the file here. Not seeing the options right now because I don't have a file or anything open, but you get the gist of it. Windows event logs, anytime there's anything going on with the server, you're going to see it within the Windows event log. So if I expand that, you can see here, you have your Windows logs. You're going to have your application, security, setup, and system. The ones you mainly want to be concerned with is system and application. The other two are kind of irrelevant for you for what you'll be doing, but mostly you want to look at application logs and system logs. Microsoft has their other logs under here pertaining to Microsoft itself, like the server. So if you expand it and expand Windows, I'll kind of move this over here just a little bit to get it out of our way. But if you can look through here and you'll actually see all the different things here, like DHCP client, that's the client for getting IP addresses, DNS client for looking things up on the web. You'll see file replication services, HTTP logs, things of that nature. But I won't bore you with all that. That's things that you can come back and look at later. But I did want to go over and show you where you would go to actually look for if the server was having a problem. You want to look in your application logs and system logs. Normally, if the server's having a problem, system log, application having a problem, application logs. So we'll go up here to Task Scheduler. This is where you can create schedules to actually do things. So by default, most of the time you will have a schedule in here that will go out and do something. So Microsoft will have different things in here that'll run if you install like Google Chrome. Chrome will do automatic periodic updates and things like that based off the task scheduler that it puts in here. And so whenever you want things to happen on a particular time base or a time trigger, you create a scheduled task within here. So I did want to go over that with you and let you know what those particular things were within the server manager and computer manager. Again, just a quick and handy snap in to be able to use is to use this new server manager tool and get yourself really familiar with it to start using some of these things here versus also going into control panel and being able to do it from there too. Also too, the new menu down here is called a charm, so you can right click on here versus in 2008 you couldn't right click here to get here. But now in 2012 you can right click here to actually get to all of your snap-ins and everything from here. So if we wanted to get to control panel from here, we can right click and get to control panel. We could also click the charm again and type in control panel. We can click control panel here. We can go over to our search and click it from here. Also, if we wanted to see any other things that were installed on the server, all of your applications now are here versus being off the start menu like in 2008 or in XP. You would just click the start menu and you'd be able to see all of your applications. Now your applications are going to be within here and they'll be alphabetically. So just wanted to also show you that. And then if you need to get out of here, you can either hit the escape key or click desktop. So it takes us back to here. So here's our control panel here, but as I was showing you earlier within the tools here up here at the top, you can get to there or you can go into there to get to them. And control panel, these are all pretty self-explanatory, except for when you start getting into things like the iSCSI initiator, your Internet Explorer options, and computer management. Again, you can get to there, which will be system. That's going to take you back to the same place, even though it says system versus computer management. So that will take you back to there. Device manager will also get you back to there as well. So just wanted to show you that and how to get around devices and printers. We're going to get to that when we start talking about print servers. So just hold on there and stay with us for just a little bit longer. Okay. And so in this video, here are the items that we covered. We did a Windows overview. We renamed the computer. We looked at local users and we looked at groups. We also looked at the admin tools off the computer management snap-in. We also took a quick look at the Windows event log. And then we used the server manager and we went through and explored it and talked about it and just how you would actually go through managing this particular server as well. So in our next video, we will cover installing different applications and different services as we continue to go through this series. But hang in there, you're going to continue to learn as we go, and we're going to start building that domain out. All right, thank you again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.